Okay, if we can begin. Today we have a very special lecture. I'm very pleased to introduce Carl Icahn as our lecturer. Mr. Icahn has a career that is really relevant to some of the topics we've talked about in this course. One theme we've talked about in this course is corporate democracy. And we've talked about a book written by Burrell and Means, who said that shareholders are so dispersed that they have really no control over a company, and boards of directors are self-perpetuating. Well, Carl Icahn has made a career of really opposing that tendency in American business. Carl Icahn graduated from Princeton University pre-med in 1957. In 1968, he founded Icahn and Company. And this company, Icahn and Company, has taken substantial shareholder positions in a number of major corporations, including RJR Nabisco, TWA, Texaco, Phillips Petroleum, Time Warner, Motorola. And when Icahn and Company takes a position in a company, it then becomes active in the management of this company and in changing the way they do business. And they've done this with enormous success. So, Carl, I'm very pleased that you could come and do this today.
Good to see you, Bob.
It would be really nice if you could give some clues to our students here who are themselves launching out on careers of how you got started in this and what your philosophy is and what you would recommend to them.
The career you're asking about, I went down to Wall Street way back in the 60s, and I thought I was really, I had gone to Princeton, a really good school,
Okay.
and I had gotten in there from a tough high school. I was the first to go for my high school. Nobody believed they never took an Ivy League, the Ivy League never took anybody from this school I went to, but anyway, I went, got in and left there, and I thought I was a real smart guy, cut it short, went down to Wall Street, and worked for Jack Dreyfus, and I was playing the market in 1961. That shows how old. And in a bull market, you make a great deal of money by doing leverage. It's a little bit like today with all the leverage that we had, and now might be coming to fruition. But I was borrowing money and bought all these convertibles, and I thought I was a genius. And Jack Dreyfus said, "You're going to lose all your money." I had made a few bucks playing poker, and that's how I started, with about $10,000. And I made all this money by borrowing at 90%. And I would go out, and I was making a lot more in 2 weeks than my father made in 2 years. And my father said, "Well, put the money away." I said, "No, Dad, and I'm going to really make a fortune here." So I went out, I remember once, and bought a Galaxy convertible then. It was a beautiful car. I had a beautiful girlfriend. It was a model. It was just pretty nice. But what happened, the crash came in 1962. I was wiped out in one day. I didn't even have the poker winnings left. And I tell you, I can't recall if the car left first or the girl left first. But it was pretty close. Maybe the same day, actually. And after that, I learned you have to learn something. And I became an expert in options. And after that, I built a following and built a big following and a big commission base by just learning one area very well. Probably I knew that area better than almost anyone on Wall Street. Not to sound too presumptuous, but very few people knew it, so it doesn't mean very much. But in any event, we built up a big following, and in '68 bought the seat on the stock exchange with the help of one of my uncles, and by that time I had saved a pretty big amount of money for those days. And then I got into arbitrage, but not merger, bonafide, and that's something else you can learn, where you can do it. You still do it today, but it's much tougher with all these computers, so I don't do it. Because I don't understand the computers; they're beyond me. So I don't work with them too well. Being a little facetious, but not too facetious. So you could buy different convertible bonds and short the stocks against them. You had no risk, but you could make a lot of money, and eventually we did real well with that. And what I do today still is pretty much the same idea. You buy stocks in a company that is cheap, and you look at the asset value of the companies that you buy the stocks in, and it becomes a little more complex. But basically, you look for the reason that they're really cheap, and the major reason is often and usually very poor management. So in a sense, it's like an arbitrage. You go in, you buy a lot of stock in the company, and you then try to make changes at the company. Today, if you read the newspapers, tomorrow you'll read it. We're trying to do the same thing at Motorola, and if you bother to read the Wall Street Journal tomorrow, or maybe the Times, I don't know, you'll see a little bit of what we're trying to do there. We're trying to get them to change the structure of the company. We think the board is a very poor board there, and we're trying to change what happens. The thing about corporate America, few people that go to college that where you are now, and most people in America don't realize how poorly most of our companies are run in this country, with many exceptions. They're really very poor, and when you get inside the companies, you realize it. And the real reason is there's no accountability. There's no corporate democracy, and I've been saying that, proselytizing it, writing about it. And the reason that we can make so much money when we go into one of these is I'm not even a manager. I never took a course in management, and I wouldn't profess to really know much, but I don't micromanage. I put in a very good manager. They cut the heck out of a course, but they changed the structure of the companies. And this is the problem in America today, in my opinion, that we are basically undermanaged. We can't compete because the best and the brightest don't get to be at the top of the corporate ladder. And I have a sort of a metaphor that's a little facetious, but not completely, about it. I call it anti-Darwinian. It's anti-Darwinian in America's corporations. And that means a guy goes to college, and this is the guy that gets to be the CEO. And he's in college, and he's the kind of guy that, was the president of the fraternity. Now, all these presidents of fraternities aren't bad guys, but basically, the normal guy that I remembered at college he's always there at the fraternity of the eating club, and he's always there to be there. If you have a bad day, you walk over to the club, and you're feeling bad, your girlfriend left you did bad on a test score or whatever, and you go over there, he's always there. He buys you a drink, and you sit around with him, he commiserates with you, you play a little pool or whatever, and he tells you whatever it is. Yeah, my girl left me. Yeah, well, they're all no good, usual conversation back and forth, and what would happen would be you like the guy. You can't help but like him. You used to wonder a little bit, when the hell did he ever do any work? But, he was always there for you. And he never made many waves. He never said anything too obtrusive, or he never showed too much intelligence, but he was a good guy. That same guy goes out into corporate America. And he politically, he's astute. He knows how to get along with people. And he never really rocks the boat. He never comes up with any great ideas. He's not a threat to his superior. And as a result, he moves up the ladder because there really, in corporate America, there's really very little accountability. And what happens in corporate America, he moves up that ladder. There's a good show, How to Succeed in Business, that was out many years ago that sort of sums it up. If you say, if a genius has an idea in corporate America, if the genius has an idea, the next idea is they give him an idea to resign. And so he moves along the ladder, and he gets up slowly up to the top. Now he has two attributes. He's likable, he's politically astute, and he's a survivor, and he knows when he's threatened. and he gets to the top. And this is the attributes of today's CEOs, for the most part, with exceptions. So, he doesn't ruffle feathers. He doesn't get the board upset. And as he moves up the ladder, he finally gets to be number 2 to the CEO. Now, the CEO is the same attributes, where he doesn't want to be threatened and he's surviving. So the CEO will never let anybody be number 2 who's smarter than he is. So by definition, the assistant of the CEO is a little dumber than the CEO. Now, this guy now is the assistant. The board likes him. The CEO eventually retires, and they make this guy the CEO, the fraternity president we're talking about. Now, he's now the head guy, the CEO. He'll bring in a number 2 guy that's a little dumber than he is because he doesn't want to be threatened. So by definition, we'll be run by morons pretty soon. And we're not too far from that right now, from that point in our economic history. And so this is a problem that we have. Now, we've been able to do okay in this country and pretty well, even with the fact that we're badly managed. Because over the last 20 years, we've had a pretty free ride. We've gotten from all over the world, the whole global economy has been booming, and we've been able to get cheap goods. And these cheap goods kept us from having inflation. So very simply put, if you don't have inflation, it's easy for the Federal Reserve to keep pumping money into an economy. So money kept flowing. You were sort of at a punch bowl. The country was at a party. And we kept drinking from this punch bowl, enjoying ourselves, and the rest of the world would take our dollars. They would take our dollars because everybody thought, oh, America, it's great. It's a little bit like you came from some town, and there's one family in the town that, doesn't do much work, sort of profligates, lie around the pool, have fun, partying a lot, have the big cars and have the good times, and the rest of the town works hard, in the farms or wherever they are, and they keep bringing stuff to this rich family's estate. They give them whatever they want, they give them food, they give them clothing, but anything, and the rich family just gives them IOUs, and they keep taking the IOUs. So the rich family doesn't do anything, just lie around the pool and have fun and travel or whatever, and everybody's working. Well, one day, a few of these people are going to say, I don't want your IOUs anymore. What the hell am I going to take your IOUs? It's worthless because you lost all your money. Well, our country, think about it, is a bit in that situation. We've been giving our IOUs, which are dollar bills, to the rest of the world and taking their cheap goods. However, we're reaching a point now where the dollar, as you've been reading, if you're attuned to it, the dollar is devaluating as we speak. And we got I believe, a real problem on our hands in the economy. The other thing we've done in the last 5-10 years, and I know Bob Schiller's been talking to you about this, is housing. Housing is like tulip bulbs almost. There was a big crisis in Holland in the 1600s on tulip bulbs, and I like reading about these crises because everybody bought tulip bulbs. Thought it was the greatest. The one guy looks and says, "Hey, what the hell am I doing with this tulip bulb?" And all of a sudden, he had a crisis. Well, and I'm not going to get into the depth of it, but our banks, because they wanted to make more and more money, and our investment banks, Wall Street, kept issuing different paper against mortgages. So it made it simple to give a mortgage. So these mortgages were given out to people that couldn't afford them. And today, you have what you call subprime mortgages, subprime paper. They issued against this paper stuff called mortgage-backed securities. They securitized them. And these things are all floating around now. And there's maybe about $3 trillion worth of subprime and all-day mortgages out there. Well, as you've seen, these have produced crises of confidence. And I don't think we've heard the last of it. The government sort of bailed out the situation by having J.P. Morgan take over Bear Stearns. And I'm not going to get in the depth of it here, but it's a real fascinating story. In any event, we have problems in our economy, and I think that we are going to see more of these problems in the next year or so. I think Bob can talk to you more about what's going to happen in housing, but a lot of it depends on that, because if you can't have your housing prices go back up, a lot of the people that bought them can't afford to pay the mortgages, nor will they want to. If they see the homes go down in value, they're going to just say, oh, they're going to walk away. Now, if that happens, these homes are the collateral from the banks for all these mortgages, and we're going to have, and probably do have already, a recession. And that recession could become a lot more acute, because today, and I'm not, going to go, I'm just going to open it for questions soon, but today there is $6 trillion more of debt in this economy that I believe it can sustain, because everyone, the middle class, went on a borrowing binge over the last few years to buy these homes and to buy for any, with the credit cards, and go buy anything they felt like buying. And as a result, I'm not certain that they can pay that $6 trillion back, but even if they can, they're not going to be willing to go buy. They're not going to be willing to go buy more things. So as you have that happening, and you have an inflation, the earnings of our corporations will go down. And they estimate, I've talked to one or two very good economists in the last few weeks, they estimate that earnings of the S&P averages will go down about 20% the next year. Well, with that, the stock market is at I would say, a precipice. You don't know which way it's going to go. So with all that said, you have to worry about all these things, and I know you're studying this and you're learning about it, but I think there'll be great opportunities ahead in the ability for Wall Street to, again, securitize and buy a lot of these companies. If you have capital, you'll be able to buy these bonds. So I do tell you that I think Wall Street is certainly a good area if you're thinking about a career. I still think it's a very good area, but I'm not going to tell you if you love to write or you love to play the cello to go and come to Wall Street. But I do think it's a good career. I think it makes sense. I think that corporate America is learning from this, and I think we're going to make our top managements much more accountable in the years ahead. There are tremendous abuses in corporate America today. Your CEO makes 400 times what the average worker makes, and he's just simply not worth it. And the reason you have this is that you have no accountability, that shareholders simply don't vote. They don't care about voting, and there's a whole reason for that. You have an internecine relation with the owners of a lot of our stocks, which are the mutual funds and institutions that don't like to vote against these managers. However, someone like myself and a few other activists do get a vote now, and we do get a proxy fight going, and we'll see, for instance, what happens in Motorola that we're doing as we speak. And I think that will give an opportunity for young people like yourselves to get into corporations in our country. And while I think Princeton might be a little better than Yale, I think Yale is a good school, and I think that all of you are really probably the top of the student bodies in this country. And going ahead in your lives, I think that the corporations might be a good place to look, or Wall Street for that matter, because I think there's going to be a need for bright people, and I think that you'll be able to be rewarded for it in the fact that there will be accountability again. Well, what I say again, there never really was accountability. So I think there will be a true corporate democracy. We'll have to evolve so that we can become competitive with the rest of the world again. So with that, I'll just basically, I think, Bob, just leave it open to questions and see if anybody has any comments.
Mr. Icahn, you were mentioned in 1962 you kind of blew up. After that entire debacle ensued, how did you regain your confidence? And I guess most importantly, how did you regain or gain the confidence of future investors?
Well, you ask a few questions. I mean, how did gain confidence? I don't think I ever lost confidence in my ability to understand what was going on. I just learned that you had to really work at something and understand it. And little by little, I mean, it was sort of interesting. I'm a sort of a obsessive guy, and I work real hard all my life. I really get into something, and I really delve into it. And what I came up with was a letter there at that time to people who sold these options. They were wealthy people across the country. It was sort of interesting. That it's not around today, but they would sell options, calls on a stock. So if you're someone who traded the market, you'd like to buy an option on XYZ stock, and wealthier people across the country would sell these options, would give you the right. Today you have the CBOE, it's much more computerized, but then you would do it with these over-the-counter transactions. And I was really one of the first to come in and say to people across the country, rather than do it with your broker, who doesn't really understand this business, rather than sell it with me. I was a broker. Let's just sell it with me. And little by little, people actually answered my ads. I would put out an ad and say, get to see what the true prices are and what the real value should be for that option that you're selling through Merrill Lynch, or you're selling with H in those days, or whoever. And I'd get letters from all over the country. And literally, I'd stay down on Wall Street till midnight, calling people in California that would write in for this letter. And we built up a big following because I was really, the risk of being modest, the only real honest guy in that business. Because everybody, I mean, not that they were dishonest, but the brokers didn't care, and they get business back from who you sell it to. I'm not saying they did anything, criminal or anything, but nobody really cared to get the right price for these people. And so by getting them the right price, they would stay with me as customers for years and years. So we built it up, and then I got one assistant, then I got another assistant, and I kept moving up the ladder. But it took a lot of hard work and perseverance, and that's really where it went to. From there was arbitrage, and now what I do. What was the second part of your question? I forgot.
How did you regain confidence in your investors and people who gave money to you? And did you feel confident that you could get them to give you money after you had kind of washed yourself out?
Well, no, I told you that we had that letter, and that we were able to after the letter have the. I don't know if you heard me, because I was sort of telling you that we put the letter out, and we just gave them a good thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Hi, Mr. Icahn. How are you?
Hi.
I'm Mark Cotter. How are you? I actually have like 3 questions for you, but I'll start with the first one. I watched the 60-minute special on you recently, and they try to portray that there'd been kind of an evolution in your career. They showed some bad press from the 80s with the TWA deal, and then they showed some good press recently with the so-called Icahn uplift and some of the corporate activism that you've been engaged in. And in that interview, you sort of insisted that you hadn't changed at all. And I was just curious if you had changed and you didn't want to tell the reporter, or if the media was giving you a bad rap.
Well, I can't hear the whole question, but I haven't changed. I haven't changed at all. Right. They call me a raider. They call you an activist. I mean, I haven't really. I think what we do, though, is very helpful to all investors. I mean, I think that's the point, because when we get into the company, the stock goes up for everybody. So it really works out. But I've never changed what I do.
Okay. Actually, I had two more questions. The second question was about China, and there was a special report in the recent Economist talking about the ravenous appetite that China has for natural resources right now. And I was curious what you thought the effect that would have on global financial markets and your investing strategy.
Well, yeah, I mean, China is a great buyer of these commodities. The trouble with this country is we don't have a lot of that. We don't have a lot of natural resources to sell them, and you question really what this country does. We make software, we make technology, we're innovative, but so are they. So what we really have to do is become a lot more productive, and we have to make our companies a lot more competitive. And today, I feel we're losing that edge. So while China is going to continue to buy things, it doesn't mean they're going to buy them from us necessarily, even though the dollar has gone down a great deal.
Thank you. This is my last question. New York Times columnist David Brooks gave a great commencement speech last year at Wake Forest, and he said he was a journalist who led a boring life and observed interesting lives, people like you. And I was curious, he mentioned that a lot of the great people that he'd met, successful people, had lots of pictures of dead people on the walls. Meaning that they had conversation. He said nearly famous people have pictures of themselves on the wall. Truly famous people have pictures of dead people on the walls. And I was curious if you had any pictures of great historical figures, or what historical figures inspired you or influenced you on a regular basis.
It's a good question. Well, one of the greatest philosophers I ever read was Aristotle, and I think his Nicomachean Ethics, if you read it, make a great deal of sense, where you live with this golden mean, but at the end use your intellect. I mean, now you have to really read him in depth to understand what he's saying. And then there's a poem by Rudyard Kipling I like, If. I'm sure a lot of you read it, you know. If you can keep your head about you and all losing theirs. I read that every once in a while, and so in the code that we follow, that's really important to be able to meet with triumph and disaster, you know, and not let either of those imposters treat those imposters just the same. Meaning that if you're doing great, don't think you're a genius, and if you're doing badly, don't think the world comes to an end. And if you work hard, maybe it sounds trite, but if you work hard and don't let your ego get ahead of you, which so many people do when you're doing well, and don't let yourself become too despondent if you're not doing well for a while, then have faith in your own ability, and really work hard at whatever you do. Give it everything you have. Well, if you can do all that, I think the chances are that you're going to hit a lucky streak, because luck comes and goes. If you have your health, luck comes and goes. And realize when you're doing really well that it's not just you, and then when you're not, it's not just you either. So I think that kind of thing. You should read that poem.
I like the line where it's, if you can be in a crowd but not lose the common touch. That's my favorite
That's
line.
right.
That's a good one.
That's right. If you can walk in a crowd and still not lose, if you can walk with kings and not lose the common touch. Yeah, okay, you know it. Yep. I've never walked with kings, though, so I don't have to worry about losing the common touch, because I'm not walking with kings.
Hi, Mr. Icahn. I have two questions. My first question is, to what extent can investors like us adopt your strategy of buying cheap and expecting the value of a company to go up?
Well, I mean, I don't consider that be necessarily a strategy. I think that when you buy something, the best is it sounds simple. It's not simple to buy it generally when everybody thinks you're wrong. And and the more people that think you're wrong, the better you're going to do it in the long run. That's how it works, because at the end of the day, when everybody is against you, everybody sort of stumbles, you know. So it's very hard to do it psychologically, but at certain times you're in between, and you're not going to get the benefit of that. But it's the old grave and Dodd philosophy that you should just look at value. But one of the things is when people get given up on a company, that's the perfect time. But it doesn't always work, because you have to be damn sure you're right. I mean, sometimes everybody is right, but generally it's not true that they're right. Generally, if you look at the total outlook on a company, and if everybody sort of is down on it, that's one to look at.
Thank you. And my second question is, what, in your opinion these days, do CEOs need to do to be successful? Do they need more education, experience, industry knowledge?
I think the answer is that most of them have to leave the company. But to be a little more fair about it, the CEOs of a lot of companies probably could do a good job, but they're more into building up. It's like the royal we, you know. It's more like the imperial CEO, and they build up a huge amount of people around them, and they very rarely get to the nub of the problem. And some of them are probably okay, probably good guys, but there's no accountability. It's like you go to school and you never have tests and nobody ever bothers you, and that's what really happens until they really hit the bad times. And I guess you could say I'm a bad time when I come in. They don't like it too much, you know. But I think that the problem we have today is, very simplistically, you don't have true elections. So you can't. It's very hard to get rid of the CEO, even though you theoretically have a vote. It's very hard to use the vote. I mean, you imagine in a political race that the senator is fighting, the incumbent is fighting for an election, and he can take all the money out of Washington, he can take it out of the Treasury of the United States, and the other guy can't, you know, and it's completely set up and rigged for the CEO, because anybody coming in to fight him, they sue him to begin with, you know. They sue you they don't sue me anymore too much because they know I'm not going away, but they sue. They do not let you have. I could go into all the different shark repellents, you call them, but it's very, very difficult to beat one of these guys. I think that's going to change in the next 4 or 5 years. That's what I was telling you, and I think we're going to have a better corporate democracy, which gives people with real talent, who really, with a work ethic, a chance to really make it.
Mr. Icahn, as you've touched upon, we may be in the worst credit bubble in history currently. If you are right, the upcoming debt deflation will be long and painful. How will you recommend that investors protect their wealth during this period to take advantage of upcoming investment opportunities?
Well, it's hard to recommend how to invest at this time. Without knowing how much capital you have. But I would be, again, you know, I being here in a different arena, you know, we invest and we look for these opportunities now. But I feel that you have to be certainly very careful right now. You have to be very careful in your investment. Even though the market's been going up the last few days, I would be careful and not have all your money invested in stocks. I would look at a lot of these distressed debt. Some of the distressed debt that has gone down. I don't know if you understand that, but some of the debt that even bank debt, which is the highest level, I think is become very cheap. So that kind of stuff is something to look at. But I'd be very careful in buying equities. But I mean, you certainly could make a fortune buying them. I mean, I'm certainly not telling you it's not going to work, but I think it's all risk reward and a lot of risk. I would be looking at this at the debt areas.
You mentioned about the U.S. dollar falling in value recently. What kind of foreign currency vehicles or trading would you recommend to kind of hedge a bet against the dollar, assuming that it continues to fall?
Yeah, I don't know much about currencies, and I really don't get into something I don't know something about, or generally don't. So I don't play the currency market, unfortunately, because our currencies go down so much. And I don't necessarily think that you should do that now, because it could theoretically turn in this country. But I'm only saying that that it has become one of the manifestations of our problem. The currency of the dollar has fallen. But, you know, you can't be that sanguine about everything in Asia either. Everybody loves Asia now and loves China and loves all these countries. But you could have some global problems, too. So I don't know that it's time to rush out of the dollar, you know.
Hi, Mr. Icahn. One major criticism that CEO against corporate activists is that they think activists don't think long-term interests of the corporation. They just want to get money and get out. How do you answer to that?
I would just say that the facts don't bear that out as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I own quite a few companies. Any company we got control of, I put literally hundreds of millions of dollars into them. I mean, I bought a company in '85, a rail car company. We put hundreds of millions. We still have the fleet. I bought casinos and energy companies, and over the years sold them now, but that's after 10 years. So any company that we've been able to get control of, I actually kept, because getting control is a great thing. And if you really believe that management's not doing well, you could go and clean them up and put a good guy in. So I know they criticize you like that, but that's part of the propaganda machine. It's just not the facts.
A related question is that what do you do when your activist spirit is not appreciated, as in the case of Motorola, when you ask for a seat in the board but just get declined, and what's your next step?
All right. Well, you have patience, and now it was a year later, and we'll see what happens now. But Motorola is a good example of what I'm talking about. People don't like it. They don't like the cell phone business, but I really think that business, if you look at Motorola and study it, you're buying that whole business for nothing. It's not reflected in the stock price. And what they have to do, and I said it publicly, is take that business out of Motorola, spin it off and give it to the shareholders. And I think then you've got a real good value. So what I'm saying is nobody likes it now, but hopefully I'm correct on that. And I really think by being an activist and putting pressure on that board that has done nothing really, that I think eventually that will happen. Hopefully.
Maybe we'll have one or two more questions. Yeah, 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Mr. Icahn, why does the United States have bad corporate governance, and which countries have better models?
All right. We have bad corporate governance. It's evolved into this. I don't think that Washington understands how bad it is. Nobody's really focused on it. The different states, the way we're structured, the different states want corporations to register it, and therefore the rules are such that they protect the corporation with the poison pills, and I can't get into all these different things, staggered boards, poison pills. And I think if you just change some of that, we could be like, for instance, England is much better, Canada has much better, where you can, without getting into detail, simplify this, where you can have truer elections. And the United States, because of the way they're structured in the states, you know, the division between federal and the state governments, they have not been able to really curtail some of the abuses, but I think it will occur sooner or later, especially to have a bad recession.
Hi, Mr. Icahn. You mentioned that you believe that many companies are poorly managed. Obviously, you don't invest in every company, so I was wondering what factors you look for in identifying companies that you want to invest in and that you think are especially poorly managed.
Okay, we look at a lot of companies. Obviously, I have a whole group of people here that do that, and I have a bunch of lawyers that look at all the covenants in these companies and their bylaws and their charters. But really, some of them become very apparent, and when you look at them, you can understand, and you have to see that in relation to the economy. But some of these companies, it's just apparent that the value of these companies would be much better if they were better run, or they just simply did certain things by breaking, like Motorola's example, they just broke it up, or and in some biotech companies that we're involved in now, there's a need for them by the big pharma. Big pharma hasn't really done research for years of any merit in the biotech area, and therefore biotech companies aren't that well run, but they have spent a great deal in research for the large molecule drugs, and so therefore you look at these, and some of them become quite apparent after doing them for the years and years I've done them. A lot of them, it's almost, after you do all the work, it's almost instinct, The risk of being immodest is asking, it's like asking some real great tennis player, well, why did you move here instead of there? Or a football player, when you're running down the field, why did you go to this way instead of that way when you're running down the field? And I don't think you can tell you. It's just sort of an instinct why you do it. But that's after a lot of work on it.
Well, I think this has been a very enlightening talk. And Carl, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.